Welcome in, everybody, to the very first episode of PWTorch Presents Fireside Chats with myself, Tyler Sage, at Ring of Tyler, and my fabulous co-host. Well, we're going to determine what that is. Zack Heydorn. Zack, how are you doing?
Doing good, man. It's so fun to hit record on this thing and get this thing off the ground. If everybody out there could have seen, the DMs and all the planning that went into this, it's really cool to get this thing, on tape for the first time, and a lot more to come as far as this goes, but it's always good to take that first step. So I'm thrilled for this, and it's really going to be something that I look forward to every week. So cheers to you, man.
Cool, very much so, and thank everyone for joining us, watching this on the Torch YouTube channel. So a little background: we are bringing back the PWTorch YouTube channel, as you are evidence in watching this. It's been dormant for about a decade since of some interviews being posted there. So the plan going forward, as of WrestleMania season 2022, is Zack and I are going to do this show every week. It's called Fireside Chats, and it is a kind of rundown of the biggest news of the week and getting our quick opinions on that, and kind of get everyone caught up on what's going on in the world of wrestling. Not everyone lives on wrestling Twitter 24/7. It'll be also, if you're not
really
wow,
well, shocking.
Healthy people at least aren't. So I think you and I are not healthy. So
oh God.
So we're doing that, and then every day we're going to do a news hit. So love in the comments below to give a name for what you want the news section to be called. If you want to go real wrestling focused and call it the Daily Slam of news or something like that, let us know in the comments below.
Beautiful.
Also, talking about that, please hit the like and subscribe button. It is very important. We're starting this up from scratch essentially, so your support there really helps, even if you use a burner account to do that and subscribe on that account. We really appreciate it. I didn't say that. I don't want to get shadow banned by YouTube here, so we're already on that boat. But so Zack, we're here and we are talking WrestleMania. And first of all, before we get into everything, I want to know, you just let everyone know you're in the Heart Dungeon, right? You said?
Yeah, Heart Dungeon.
That's your location.
Heart Dungeon, the Chicago region of the Heart Dungeon.
Yeah.
Down here. Yeah. So many people, like in the pandemic, since this has been my spot, like it's like, dude, are you in a bunker of some kind? And it's like, no, it's just I live in an old house, and it's like a pseudo finished basement. So this will be my spot, but I like that. The Chicago district of the Heart Dungeon. That's good.
Yeah, you can stretch everybody here via video with your hot takes.
Yes.
And I'm obviously in the loser wrestling fan corner of my house. So we'll rotate wrestling gimmicks throughout the week. So keep an eye out. You'll see fun little Easter eggs from there. So Zack, let's get started. It's WrestleMania week. This is releasing on Thursday, and we got WrestleMania 2-night event coming up here. So just to start, let's talk about the WrestleMania build and your thoughts on how it's been. Typically we look at WrestleMania post the Royal Rumble event and all the things that take place from Rumble to Mania. So big picture, small picture, where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my thought on it and like the build in general is, I mean, it is kind of big picture. I don't think that there's like, I think it's like there's some high highs there, and then there's just some low lows. And I think it's kind of like indicative of just, Vince McMahon and WWE from just a fundamental perspective. Like, I think the stuff at the top of the card this weekend has been very well done. Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, I think, is one of the best WWE WrestleMania programs that they've had in years, when you take into account the promo work, the narrative, the length of time, and the fact that they've gotten it to this point where it's boiling at the right moment. It doesn't feel like it's overstayed its welcome at this time. And so that's been really good. I think the Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair program has been excellent for a lot of the same reasons. Long-term storytelling. Yeah, I think Becky Lynch is a little bit miscast, but being opposite Bianca Belair has helped her kind of get her feet entrenched into the heel role. But so generally speaking, I think that's good. You know, you've got the Steve Austin stuff with Kevin Owens, really solid. Like, yes, that's not a match, I get that, but you have Kevin Owens out there doing business and doing what he has to do to make sure that Austin gets the biggest pop possible, and that audience is just salivating at the opportunity to see him get his ass kicked by Stone Cold. And I think he's done that. And even like the Cody Rhodes thing, let's just like assume that it's him that's going to face Seth Rollins. That's gotten a decent chunk of time. And I think you know, WWE's approach to kind of hyping Cody has been, you know, like I think a little bit of teeters on the edge of false advertising, you know, but it's been enough where like they've attempted to build some anticipation while saving a big surprise for WrestleMania. So I can respect that. So you have that going on. And then it's just such a big drop off to me in terms of the build for everything else on the show. It's like you've got Knoxville and Sami Zayn. How much can you do with that? You've got McAfee and Austin Theory. It's, you know, there's not a lot of depth there. You've got a triple threat tag team match on the Raw side of things. You've got the Usos defending their tag team titles against Rick Boogs and Shinsuke Nakamura. So it's just like, there's just such a huge gap. And I think like you want a more balanced build and a more balanced show. And this is just very, very top heavy. And, you know, we'll see how it all turns out on this weekend, like whether that philosophy worked or whether like these shows drag until those big matches. But that's kind of like my high level take.
Yeah. And you stole, you know, the words right out there, you know, top heavy is exactly how you could only describe this WrestleMania and how it's built to it. And, you know, I think there's a lot of people will say like, hey, there's that traditional build from Rumble to WrestleMania where you have the winner of the Rumble match, you know, traditionally in the 80s, 90s and 2000s, right? Before you had two belts, before you had a women's Rumble where, you know, I think people look at that era and don't, you know, they're not watching it critically like they're watching this current era, right? I mean, if you have Stone Cold winning 2 years in a row, Shawn Michaels winning 2 years in a row, Mr. McMahon won 1 year, right? For the heyday of the company, and that person won, and then no one talks about what happened in February, March until WrestleMania, right? Because they did a lot of stuff to fill the gaps, and the stories are probably not as ironclad and perfect as you would imagine, or at least, you know, how it's you know, praised for in its past. So yeah, I think like anything, as long as there's good stuff at top. I mean, we've had many WrestleManias where, I mean, the one that comes to my mind is like WrestleMania 32, the last time we were in Dallas. I mean, that the only build there was Triple H and Roman Reigns, and it felt inevitable. And, you know, so
people weren't behind Reigns on that journey. Like, so it was kind of like set up to be his crowning moment, but nobody was behind it. So it really fell flat. I was in the building for that. And I mean, yeah, it was flat is the only word that I can use to describe it. My now wife was with me, and like, she always talks about it. Like, you know, you showed me other WrestleMania matches, and like nothing on that show was as hot as any of the stuff that you had shown me before. And so like, to your point, I don't think that's the case this year, which is, you know, a good thing. And maybe that's a low bar, but still.
The main point there is I think it hit, you know, kind of, not to spin this to AEW because it's WrestleMania season, but there's kind of something on these shows for everybody. There is, you know, if you like Johnny Knoxville, if you're a certain age, probably our age of millennials, that Jackass hits for us, or Jake Paul hits for a younger demo. Stuff like Paul, that. Logos. What? Yeah.
Well, they're interchangeable.
I cannot get it right. So
they're interchangeable.
I'm trying to get a match with one of them, a boxing match with one of them. So so that's my gimmick here. But so yeah, I think for everything it is, I think it's good for a couple specific things. But there's TV, there is Saudi Arabia stuff you got to fit in there from a, you know, not that I'm pro having those or telling that, you know, ideally you have a story that goes for a year like Hogan and Savage did in 30 years ago. But yeah, so I think overall I would say this build is solid on most of these matches. And also you got to look at the perspective of someone like us, someone that's watching this versus someone who kind of pops Raw on or SmackDown on every week. And I think the build for them would probably be even more of a high praise than someone who's critically analyzing a 3-month build for something.
I think so too. And for the critical analyzers out there too, it's like, you have to look at it also through the lens of like what WWE is now, like the reality of it, which is like, it's hard. You're not going to, it'd be really hard to have the Hogan Savage build from 30 years ago in 2022 WWE. There's so much television time, so much content to fill. Like if you took that angle and just put it in this year, you'd get like, what, 6 months out of it, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's just a totally different world in that regard. And so taking that into account, in some ways you kind of roll your eyes because you have to go through this stuff so fast. And I think that's the downside of it. But the plus side is where you can look at WWE in some instances and go, wow, they really strung this Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar thing from August until now, with all that content in between. So, some of it's really impressive. And I just think, it just drops off so much. It's like falls off a damn cliff. And so it's like, it doesn't, there's got to be some kind of middle ground there.
Yes, for sure. And definitely when you watch, Raw this week, you can see that there's the highs were the highs with Lesnar and with Reigns, and some other stuff. I think the hair cutting hit or miss with some people, but it was just to end with your main event is RK Bro, and which is fine, but you have a non-finish, things like that. I mean, we can get into that forever with the booking of WWE. We'll get into that after WrestleMania season, so I don't want to. We'll put a pin in that, but I think if you were to watch. I think what WWE wants is some version of a fan that gets the highlights, but somehow keeps the TV on for 3 hours. So really it's nobody. That's who it's designed for. But, for someone like me, just my perspective, I don't live or die as a fan like I used to for WWE. And I think maybe this job did that a little bit to me as well. But for someone that is not locked in 12 months out of the year, watching, every bit of content that they have like I used to, I think it's fine. But it doesn't really entice you to watch all, 7 hours of content every week. But
sure. Yeah.
So let's move on. Still, obviously talking about WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And just kind of we can bounce back and forth. And I want to talk about the top 3 moments or matches that each of us are excited for. Now, the Seth Rollins matches, we don't know what that is. We're going to talk about that separately. So please eliminate that from your list, Zach. But I assume we're going to have a similar one. So we'll just say, we'll bounce around, but you start with yours and then we'll just kind of bounce back and forth, talk about a couple.
Yeah, this will be fun. So yeah, the obvious one I think is, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. The build has been really, really solid. Like I'm super high on it. But they have to have a match that's worthy of that build come Sunday night. Like I don't think this can be your traditional like Brock Lesnar style match. I think they have to go deeper than that. They have to go longer than that. They have to give this thing the just match that it deserves. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out and just the match itself, because I think if those two guys can get there, it could end up being a really good match. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to the KO show stuff. Sometimes you forget in the or at least I do, that there's fun to be had. I mean, it's WrestleMania weekend. It's a big weekend for professional wrestling. And this segment, like, there's not going to be a lot to it. Like, there's just not. I think everybody pretty much knows what it's going to be. But it's going to be fun. It is going to be a blast to watch that in action. Glass breaking, a Steve Austin brawl. Kevin Owens is gonna sell like a maniac, and it's just going to be a fun part of WrestleMania weekend. And I think you can analyze like, hey, okay, should that be a top moment on your biggest show of the year? Like, what about the people that are wrestling and on television every week? And it's like, yeah, that's true. But, when you play the card of biggest star in the history of the business, there's nobody on the current roster of any era that can really top that. So you go with this, and I just think you just sit back and you enjoy the ride. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm really looking forward to Becky Lynch and Bianca. This is a big moment for Bianca Belair. You know, I thought that the booking of her at SummerSlam didn't do her any favors, and I think she's built back up successfully, where she's kind of simmering at that point where she was ahead of last year. And I think a really good match with Becky Lynch and putting a bow on that story is important for her as she continues to be, you know, one of the faces of the women's division in WWE. So she needs to have a good night, and I think she will. But yeah, those are my three.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, obviously, number one for me also is Roman and Brock. I think that would be any wrestling fan's choice here.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, we talked about in the build, so I don't belabor the point, but you know, this is the fourth or fifth time these guys have had a match. So the fact that you can get to this build, obviously, the unification of the belts is important, and hopefully they don't really, you know, show a new belt the Monday after WrestleMania. I think we're all in agreement having a run there with presumably Roman. With both belts, and hopefully it's not unified into some ugly design. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, so that we're both aligned there, and I do think, you know, it's almost like the positive of Brock Lesnar being booked the way he's been booked for 7 years. It feels like that if we get a 20-minute match, 25-minute match out of him, and these guys push themselves to the limit, and it's as close to a WWE WrestleMania 5-star match that you can get. I mean, there's definitely tiers there, and they're not going to be doing crazy work rate and things like that. But you can tell a story that is worth that rating if you wanted to with these guys and what it's been built. So a lot of potential there. I'm going to combo 2 Sunday matches for the celebrity aspect, just for tickle me intrigued. Not that I think they're going to be particularly good, but sure. You know, Sammy and Johnny Knoxville for me is. I think it's got almost no one expects anything out of it. So if there's any sort of fun moment in there, and I'm just intrigued to see what they do. And, you know, just for me personally, if I was not watching wrestling, I think the Knoxville addition to this would get me to at least buy Peacock for $5, whatever it is, and check it out. So I think there's something there for a certain small demographic. I'm a weird guy in general, so I don't think good.
I was just about to say, you know, so to all of our listeners out there who don't like celebrity matches, Tyler's the one to blame because you know, found the silver lining in why WWE does them.
Yeah, I mean,
to each their own. Each their own.
My birthday is in early April, so it always comes around WrestleMania. So we're having like a combo party. Nice. And I asked everybody, like, hey, here's the matches, and they're not super wrestling fans, not all of them, and they all chose Sunday because they wanted to see the Knoxville match.
Really?
For what it's worth, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but again, that's anecdotal, so don't take that as but then that and McAfee and I am blanking. Please help me.
Austin Theory.
Austin Theory. Yes, thank you. And you know, that just we saw McAfee and Cole in NXT. And you know, he over delivered in that spot, so this can be a different type of match for sure. It's not going to be an Adam Cole special, but just curious to see what, you know. I think that's also going to be the dichotomy of the work rate from celebrities too. Is Knoxville to McAfee to be expected? Yeah. So just to see kind of morbid curiosity on those 2 matches, I'm intrigued by. And then, you know, the other one from a pure, you know, this one's for the wrestling fans, Edge and AJ Styles, which is on night 1 now, right? I don't have the schedule in front of me, but yeah. Correct. I mean, night 1's obviously the wrestling fan night, and night 2 is kind of the glitz and glamour of WrestleMania 10. Is kind of what night 2 feels like a little bit with 1 match. But so yeah, I mean, that match obviously has the chance to be, you know, a legit 4-star match if it's got time. Hopefully it will, and you know. Hopefully it has a conclusion. It doesn't need to go on for 3 months after this. It certainly could, but I think that, you know, if it's the first of a long series of matches, it's not going to be as good. But if it's just a one-off and these guys, you know, have a great match, then I think that could steal the weekend for that show. So that's where I am. So that leads us to.
That's a good list. That's good. That AJ Styles and Edge is a good one. I'm turned off by the story that they told, but once they get it in the ring, you know, you got 2 pros going at it. That's a good choice. Good pick.
Well, I would say for sure that, and then even probably the Bianca and the Becky Lynch is probably better if you are vaguely aware of the story, or if you can just bypass that out of your brain. So at least for me, I don't know. I know you like that build, so
I do. And it brings me a question, and we don't have to spend too much time on this, but how many, like, Ronda Rousey, we're in like what? How many minutes here? 15 minutes into the show, and something like that. No mention of Ronda Rousey, and that's telling in terms of how she's, like, her run since coming back at the Royal Rumble. I think it's super telling, and obviously they ponied up a lot of money to get her, and I really just, she has not had any sort of return at this point that's worthy of those dollars. It's just she's had no impact, man.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that would have made my list, and I almost thought about it, was because I think that's going to be probably the most awkward match to watch on TV. I just think the reactions would be poor for on paper. It should be one of the biggest matches WWE can put on. And obviously it's kind of was rumored it would be a main event one night. And the Steve Austin interview is going to be the main event Saturday per, wrestling sources, would take that with a grain of salt, as we all know. But it's just, I mean, it's a lot to do with her character and coming back the way she did, and just forcing it like we've seen in lots of companies, not just WWE. I think that's a big deal about it. And, she's got an uphill battle from comments and things like that. And then she's just not very charismatic on the mic, so you can overdo a lot of that if you are that. So, I think the match could be really good. I mean, she's had a lot of really good in-ring work. I mean, her best match ever is probably that mixed tag when she first came in, but, so we'll see. I think that is kind of Johnny Knoxville, Sami Zayn level, where there's almost no expectations for that match. And at least for me, I don't know if that's everywhere, but I think the work rate could be good, but they could kind of phone it in, or they could go crazy and have some awesome moment that we're going to remember. So I think that's kind of a wild card match, but I think it's got as much attention as it should, with you bringing it up at least. So
there you go.
So our next topic on WrestleMania is, as I talked about some Sunday matches. You talked about some Saturday matches. It's this is the third year of 2 nights of WrestleMania. It was then, it's now, but Zack, is it forever? Are we gonna do 2 nights of WrestleMania for the foreseeable future?
I mean, I try to sit back and like think about, like, okay, what's the benefit of two nights? I mean, they didn't like you can fit 100,000 people in AT&T Stadium. They haven't sold all the tickets, so like it'll be interesting to look at the numbers, to see, like, all right, if you just had one night, did you really, like, or did you sell more tickets because you had 2 nights of WrestleMania or not? Last year, the last 2 years, I think it made sense because of just the world circumstances, like 2 nights on, when it was the start of the pandemic, where nobody knew what the hell was going on, and you didn't know how many people you could have in a building at a certain time, like splitting that up, that made sense. And then last year it made sense too, because you weren't going to have a full building. So, okay, you can get half full this night, half full that night. Boom. You're kind of at, max capacity across 2 nights. Well, now it's like, okay, it doesn't, I don't know that it has that business reason that it had the last 2 years. So for that reason, I'll say no. I think they're going to go back to one night, and I just don't know that the business reason is there if you're not going to sell out both nights. And then you add into that the fact that you have this top heavy card, and you have to, like, dilute both nights with matches that aren't ready for WrestleMania, so that both nights are filled up. That has diminishing returns as well. So I'm almost certain that I'm wrong about this prediction, but I'm going to go with no. They'll go back to one night next year in LA.
Yeah, I think the main thing there is business, as you talked about. That's the reason for the way WWE does anything. But I think it depends too. They're in SoFi next year, right? Which is a huge stadium. So it's hard enough to sell a stadium out once. So just to sell it twice is almost impossible for anybody. I mean, unless it's some sort of crazy festival. If you had Coachella in SoFi, you could probably do it. But we could obviously do it. But so it just depends on, is there some incentive for them to do it? with Peacock, is that built in to have 2 nights of content for
Right.
the biggest thing? You know, who knows? We don't know any of that stuff, but it's crazy. I'm the guy who's anti long shows. So in theory, two
Amen.
like 3.5 hour shows is better than 1 7 hour show. So
well, that's the thing too. That's a trade-off that I'm willing to make also with the 2 nights. Like if it's, because I'm with you, like 1 6-hour show, you know, that there's that's a problem. 2 3-hour shows is better than that. But you know, I think for WrestleMania, you look, I don't know why you just can't look at like a tight 3.5 to 4 hour show like that. That's a long time, a really long time, and probably too long. Definitely too long, but it's WrestleMania. I get it. You want it to seem big. That's a lot different than 6 hours or 7 hours. Like those WrestleManias, like 32, 33, 34, 35, especially. I mean, they were just brutal to get through, and like you just can't be excited the whole way. And so that's a really good point though on you know, to keep it short.
And I think next week we should do this after we've with the you know, with having hindsight, we should try and build a 3 and 3.5 hour WrestleMania from this card of this past
that would
week
be fun
to make sure to prove that you can do it, because you definitely could. I mean, we could do it now. I just don't have all the matches in front of me, but
yeah, well, and like we could actually see too, like in hindsight, like, all right, well, this match got 30 minutes, this one got 25, and like pieces together that way could be interesting. You know, the audience doesn't know this, but you know, in a couple weeks, our 7-hour Fireside chat is going to be on the channel. You know, we got to increase those listening minutes.
Yes, definitely. All right, very good. So I think we're on the same page. I think. You don't think it's going to be 2 nights next year? Right?
No, I don't. I think it's going to be 1 night. Yep.
And I didn't answer. I think it will be 1 night as well, because obviously what has been reported, you know, is The Rock is going to be part of the main event. We'll see. Obviously, all depends on his schedule. But if you can do that and have that be the cherry on top, you could put a lot of nothing below it for 1 night and sell at that place.
You could.
Or you could have them tease them both nights and sell out 2 nights. So that's probably the thought. We'll see. But yeah, so there's that. All right. So the elephant in the room that we didn't talk about, I asked us not to talk about it, was the Seth Rollins match we saw on Monday. All you do is go ask the boss.
Ask the boss.
Yeah, I mean, that's all Vince ever says. That's all we ever hear. You just got to get in his ear. He's very approachable, very easy to get a hold of, and then you got to just grab that brass ring. You're good to go. So that's what we learned there, which is great. But yeah, so Seth's got a match on Saturday, and I guess I'm gonna dovetail this into another question. I mean, it's been reported that the Steve Austin interview is the main event of Saturday. Do you think that can just be a brawl in a stunner and get out of there as a closing of a show? Or do you think you need something like this match to somehow fit in there? I don't. So yeah, take that.
Yeah, man. Wow. I mean, that's they've got. I mean, I think you have to go with Steve Austin just because. And it's not necessarily an advocacy of that move, but it's just like if you put anything on after it, like it's just not gonna jive with that audience. I mean, I think that is gonna be the hottest that the audience gets. And so if you put on Cody after that, for example, I think the pop will be big, but it won't. My gut instinct is it'll be a little tired and it won't be as big as it was for Steve Austin. And I don't think you want that for Cody. Like you want him to be the early big surprise pop so that people are fresh and they're ready to go and they give him a big star reaction. I think that's what you want. Ideally, you'd be able to put on one of the women's championship matches. To me, I think that's what you'd want to do. It seems to me that based on how they booked Becky Lynch versus Bianca Belair, there may be another match in there. So I wonder if they're thinking that like, okay, hey, you know, that can't go on last because we're going to do some kind of, you know, weird finish to get to a third match. And that leaves Charlotte and Ronda a good option, a really good option on paper, but in practice, it's not hot enough. It's not anywhere near hot enough to be in the main event. It's It's just not, especially in the main event after Steve Austin and after a debuting Cody. That would be a nightmare. I really think that'd be a nightmare. So they're kind of stuck in that regard. And so I think you just do what you know is going to work. You know, Steve Austin will deliver. You know, the pop will be big. You know, the crowd will have a blast. You do that, and then you save the big match main event for Sunday.
Cool. Sorry, I sidetracked us. That was my question. But yeah, so let's talk about the Seth Rollins match. He's got Mr. McMahon has handpicked his opponent, and Seth will find out when he's in the ring along with all of us. So obviously, looks like it's Cody. Everyone thinks it's going to be Cody. So I want to ask you, what if it's not? And then what is your worst case scenario for if it's not Cody? And as a fan, as a follow-up to both of those, I feel like yourself and myself and people watching this, people who are really consuming any sort of wrestling content outside of the four walls that are WWE approved content, think it's going to be Cody, but they haven't done a ton to allude that he is going to be there, which is, part of a surprise. But do we have the right as wrestling fans? You're going to be the one to dictate this to all of us, Zack. So it's big pressure. Do we have the right to be upset if Cody's not there?
Oh, wow. I mean, it depends on who it is. Like, that is there. Mm-hmm. So I think that I don't think you can be upset that it's not Cody, because there hasn't been any indication on television that it's going to be. However, it can't be Elias,
Shane McMahon, Goldberg.
It can't be Shane McMahon. It can't be Goldberg. Cause that's just not, that wouldn't, I don't think that's a good enough payoff for how much time they gave this on TV. Vince McMahon's involved. The sourcing says it's Cody, and so it just, that would be another disaster. If it's not Cody, I think you kind of have to go, all right, we kind of hoped, but you can let your imagination run wild a little bit with it. And sometimes news reports aren't accurate, mm-hmm. or, things change, pal, whatever. Yeah. But it matters who it is, so I think if it's Braun Breaker, can't really be upset. It's not a great payoff, but can't be upset. It makes sense. Vince McMahon would want to bring him in, big time spot, goes over Seth Rollins, you're debuting a new star in a big way. I think it checks some boxes. Again, not advocating for that, but I think you can explain that away. You cannot explain Elias or Shane McMahon that whew, boy, that I don't know, man. That would be bad. That would be really bad.
Yeah. Even Steve Austin at the end might not be able to save that crowd. Right. And me sitting on my couch, the pure agent of chaos inside of me would kind of love to see at least an alternate version. If I could watch that on Peacock later, the alternate version where it's where here comes the money hits, and then just what happens after that. But I do think it's Cody as well, but I just think it's interesting.
It is well, and I just, do you think, there's look, they've done some weird things before, obviously, but I don't even, and I could next week on the show, I might be eating my words on this, but I just don't even think WWE can be that tone deaf on this. I just don't see it. I just don't. I could eat my words on it, but I just don't see that they can they can miss this badly, And if they tried out Goldberg, man, wow, that would be, that'd be a miss. That'd be a huge misjudgment of the whole situation and the vibe of your fan base, your customers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say you're probably at a 1% that something like that would happen. If I could ascertain that from you, I'm probably a 15% chance. So I guess that's kind of our different viewpoints of the company that
neither one are good. 15 still not great.
But that's even a possibility. I think in their mind, the revenue is going to be the same if they do choose to do that. Not in 5 years, but next quarter will be the same. And that's kind of what's driving everything, not long-term growth.
Fair point.
Things like that. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah. So Zach, let's move off of WrestleMania. We got some other topics. We'll kind of rapid fire-ish here to end the show.
Let's do it.
But we got NXT Stand and Deliver coming up on 1 p.m. Eastern, I believe.
1
I think
p.m.
it's
Eastern
noon.
Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah. So your thoughts on NXT, where it's at. You had to remind me to add to the list of shows. I don't know if we're gonna peek behind the curtain there, but I was like, hey, is this good? And you're like, hey, what about NXT? And I was like, oh, yep. And yeah, like we talked off air before we started, takeovers were, at least for me, I don't know, what 3, 4, 5 years ago, takeovers before big shows were the thing to really look forward to for at least the type of wrestling fan that I guess aligned myself to be. I was always excited about WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, etc. But those takeover matches were something special, and to have it be where it is now, I think you could easily advocate like this is good. This is like with the brand, it feels more aligned with WWE as opposed to NXT did. But I have forgotten about it as an event. So where do you stand on all that?
Yeah. So I mean, it's fascinating, just the change in the brand and the fact that like what's normally or what had been, habitually like a hot part of WrestleMania weekend just isn't that hot anymore. I think the 2-night thing hurts it too, and it would have hurt it in Triple H's NXT just because, you're doing 2 nights of WrestleMania. You've got to fit in the Hall of Fame. You got to fit in NXT somewhere. Like, so I think that hurts it. But I just would say like, and I think I'm in the minority on this, but I don't hate NXT 2.0. Let's put it that way. And I enjoy it some weeks. And I think part of that is you're watching talent that is going to get a shot at the main roster. Like you're not investing for nothing. You're not investing in Shinsuke Nakamura to see him then, kind of just fizzle out on the main roster. Like, Braun Breaker is going to be somebody like on the main roster someday, most likely. Like there's a good chance he's being set up for that. He's wrestling in that environment, those kind of matches. And so I've taken that as like a fresh approach to the show and to the brand that I thought needed a refresh. I thought they got really bland there at the end, with the same types of matches, the Adam Cole style stuff, Kyle O'Reilly, like that. A lot of that just was really hot when it happened for the first time. But you're in the third year of it. It's like, okay, well, we've seen this before, and so this is a fresh take on that. The War Games pay-per-view that they did, I thought was a strong show. So I'm kind of an advocacy of like give it a shot. Like if you can, like the Braun Breaker Dolph Ziggler match, Dolph Ziggler, it's hard to have a bad match with that guy, so like. There's something there. Tommaso Ciampa and Tony D'Angelo wrestling, that is Ciampa, like there's still some nuggets of good there. And I think if I watch it through the lens of like trying to watch the next crop of potential WWE superstars develop, not necessarily, I need this to be a five-star match. So I think it's very much how you decide to watch NXT 2.0. But I think there's an avenue to potentially enjoy it. So, but it just doesn't have the same buzz though that it used to. There's no question about that. And you're like, oh yeah, moment. You're certainly not the only one that I think has that. Like, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think for a broader NXT topic, which we can probably tackle this more in a future episode, but what you're describing, I can get behind. But I think we're 6 months away from realizing that is a viable option because we haven't seen anyone that's been featured in 2.0 come up and make an impact on the main roster. I think we will, to be fair, because they're in the system. I mean, Pritchard and McMahon are running it down there and wrestling that style, and it's gonna be at least Shinsuke would have been dancing with Rick Boogs in NXT, right? That's what we would have known. So we would have known what to expect when he comes up. Right. So, which is better than the alternative, which is like, hey, here's this guy we think could be, AJ Styles-esque, somewhere in that zone where have great matches, tell great stories, be around for 10 years and be one of those guys as opposed to what we have now. So, getting that pulled away from what we thought it could be, as opposed to just like, hey, here's what it is, and it's pretty good. So, and I guess it sounds a little conceited by me, but I do believe that point that, look at the rest of the roster. You got Gunther, you got LA Knight, you got Cameron Grimes. I think these characters work really well, and they can come up to the main roster and do the same thing and be good baby faces or heels, depending on the situation there. And, D'Angelo as well fits that mold. And there's a handful of people that do that right now. So yeah, I think the point you made there is good, and to give it a shot. And I think once you have the first 2 or 3 people come out of that system and it proves that it works, I think you can get more people, watching at least Raw, the 1.6 million people watching Raw. You'll get another couple 100,000 that'll bounce over and want to see the future like they used to. So
yeah, for sure. And that's, if you watch the show and compare it to, Black and Gold NXT, you're going to have a problem. Like, there's no doubt, it's not the same show at all. So, and I think some people can't get past that, and that's fair. That's a risk WWE took with the rebrand, but yeah, it certainly would not play well if that's your mindset going in.
And I would say the way NXT Black and Gold was, especially the 1 hour version of the show, at least for me, was very skippable to begin with. Back in the day, at least for me, like I thought it built to the takeovers tremendously, but there was a lot of, it felt very old school, very 80s, early 90s in design, and which is fine. I mean, that's what we all kind of go back and love, but also don't think that is like the greatest achievement in the history of wrestling either. Not obviously, in ring was fantastic. It's one of the greatest eras of North American wrestling, is that Black and Gold, from, I don't know, from what was Pac's name? I can't even remember. Adrian Neville.
I'd say like 2014 to 17.
I mean, you got like
pretty solid.
Owens like apron bombing Sami Zayn till like Cole's end of Cole's first reign is some of the best wrestling you'll ever see, that kind of era. But if you watch week in and week out, they were getting to good matches, but there's a lot of filler in between, a lot of people that never made it, and it felt not perfect. So I think NXT 2.0 does a better job of being a TV product than Black and Gold did, because it really wasn't. It was developmental that got turned into a TV product. So again, apples and oranges, but cool. So we'll see NXT Stand and Deliver this weekend.
Sir.
All right, cool. Some out of the ring stuff. This is more the format of what the show will be in the future. But this week, I think the biggest news of the week for me was Triple H going on First Take and discussing his health issues he had. Late last year? Was that like October?
Yeah, the fall, September.
September. So he talking about that, and he's retired from in-ring action. So Zack, which your take, I guess not really a take, but your reaction and your thoughts on Triple H. We can get into legacy talk later. I think that's a longer form podcast, because he deserves that from what he's done in the ring. But yeah, your thoughts on this?
It's big news. He wasn't a regular guy in the ring anyway, but when that level of a star hangs it up and retires, I think it's a big deal. And then you add on to it that the fact that he was so sick and had significant, scary health issues. It's like, I'm just, my hat's off to him, to be honest. Like, it's like, I think you think about, if you're Triple H, you think like retirement, the decision to retire is a hard one. And in this case, it's like, it's not like, it's just, you had to, and it's just a totally different mindset. I think I don't know that Triple H would have been the kind of guy to, like, obviously Triple H has a healthy ego. He would be the first one to admit that, but I still don't see him as like a retirement ceremony kind of guy. Like, I see him riding off more like, Shawn Michaels did with the last match, the wave to the crowd, like, and that's kind of it. So he didn't get kind of that stamp on his career that I think a lot of people, especially people of his level, like would want, and the fans, would want to. But dude, none of it matters, like when you come through that, what he went through, I'm glad he's okay, glad he's healthy, or getting back to being healthy. And the in-ring stuff is meaningless compared to that.
I agree, and especially all the stuff with with the passing of Scott Hall in recent weeks too. I mean, they're lifelong friends, and you have similar. I mean, he was having hip surgery, and that's a rough place to be if you have heart issues, as we know, as an older person. So, not that it's exactly the same, but man, that's got to be. I don't know. Maybe that's why he came out and wanted to talk about it. I don't know, but. So yeah, that really hit me watching it. It's just like this dude just lost one of his best friends and to a similar thing. Then everyone, they're all getting older. We're all getting older, right? That's life. But it really puts stuff in perspective. And I'm just really glad that of all this. I mean, I'm sure it's been out there, but I haven't seen a ton of talk about like his role backstage now and Vince, all this stuff like it doesn't matter. And like all that stuff happened before he got sick. And I'm just glad like. It's been mainly praised for, what he's done in the ring. Obviously, whether it's your cup of tea or not, it's been, meme to death what a Triple H style match is, but he's got a legacy in the ring, whether you like it or not. I think there's not a ton of people that you can just randomly tell someone how, whatever, name a person who's not a legend, how their matches go. And he's earned that and go ahead.
No. Finish for sure.
Well, yeah, then just like producing too. I mean, he's got multiple careers, and the producing of it, I think, is what he'll be known for more than his in-ring stuff, which is, I don't know, maybe not, but I think with a certain segment of these fans, 15 years from now, I think he'll be remembered more for the NXT run that he did, and we'll see what he does in the future, but if he wants to. So it just, yeah, I mean, I'm obviously happy he's made it, and hopefully he gets healthy and puts. Himself and his family first, as opposed to getting in there and doing that crazy grind to make everyone but him feel good about himself, so.
Well, and it's just such a, like there's a time and a place for everything. And I think, part of Triple H's legacy inevitably will be, that backstage influence. The thing of it is, he wasn't the only guy in wrestling to have that. You talk about Steve Austin, not an easy guy to work with backstage. Most top stars aren't. And that's not to say like, hey, good job, Triple H, for some of the things that you did. It's just not like this rare thing. And it's just, now is not the time to discuss that, but eventually it will be. And when it is, we will.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so next thing we had MJF on with Ariel Helwani on, I forget what network he's part of now. I think it's DraftKings or FanDuel or something. But he has his MMA and he's a big pro wrestling fan. And MJF was on the podcast this week. Seemed to be as much of an MJF shoot interview as you'll get. He's praising NXT and Bruce Pritchard. It seemed a little tongue-in-cheek to me listening to it, but there are reports. Who knows if it's true or not? It could be an angle, but Tony Khan wasn't happy the way it went. It happened outside the structure of AEW, and if you follow any sort of wrestling media personalities like Zack and I do, you can kind of know that AEW was kind of easy to get an interview at the start, and now it's kind of really hard to get an interview with AEW for especially someone of MJF's ilk. So I guess, Zack, do you make anything of this rumor? And then that it's a contract. He's not happy with this contract. Do you think this is MJF being a heel and just going to the next level? Or do you think he's truly unhappy and doesn't want to wait till 2024 to get paid and is actually buttering up WWE to get paid? So what's your take on this?
I mean, my take is I think the stuff about him being unhappy is likely. I mean, he might not be happy, but he's got a contract. So, there's not a lot that Tony Khan has to do about that because he's got a contract. So it is what it is for a while. So I think that's more of MJF working than anything else. I do, if you take the news that they had a kind of a heated argument at face value, like that I could buy. I could buy Tony Khan going like, hey, wait a minute, man, like you kind of crossed the line on this, and MJF pushing back on that. Like, and I think that's, AEW is only 3 years old, right? And like for the first year, you kind of like, you're in this honeymoon phase. The second year was all about pandemic, right? And into the third year. Like, so it's like, that's not even really like a real environment, is weird. Now you're going to have like the business of running a pro wrestling company, like rear its ugly head into that rosy picture, because you've got egos, you've got people that want to make money, you've got Tony Khan who wants to run a good business, you've got politics, like all of that, just like at any other job, will come to play. Like it will be, and we saw the first piece of that with Cody Rhodes. Like that's going to happen. People are going to not get re-signed, and people are going to ask for a lot of money. That's the nature of the business. And I think, I like that in my wrestling star, because I think people want to watch people like that have that high of that think of themselves in that way. Because if you don't see yourself as that type of star, no one else will. And the biggest stars get paid the most money and get treated like stars. And so I think it's Tony's job to manage that, and you're going to inevitably have heated discussions as you try to manage that. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's like the train's off the track or anything like that. It's just that is business, and we haven't had to see Tony do this yet. But it's whether this is real or not, it's coming either way.
Yeah. And I think that's a good take. I think putting a pin in this to see if anything happens in a couple of years and see if what the relationship's like is good for something like this. Yeah. Just
March 29th, 2022. We discussed it.
Yeah, we'll talk in 2 years. We'll see when his contract's. But just potentially foreshadowing. I also think, I don't subscribe to this place it came from. I believe it was Fightful. If I have that correct, I want to make sure we source things as properly as possible here. But on anything like that, especially in wrestling, in other aspects of like news, not that you have to check everything. I think there's sources you can trust pretty much all the time. But for something like this, I would just say, like, think of the situation, right? They're having a heated argument. And is there multiple people in that room, or is that a phone call? And if it's a phone call, who would win from leaking that, right? So think about that when you're hearing stories like this. It's like think more sports than anything, but agents leak a lot of stuff to get money for their client. So that's kind of where I'm taking this. If it's some combo to me, probably, of MJF doing good heel work outside of his TV time on Wednesdays and Fridays, even though I don't think he's ever on Rampage, but and maybe potentially making sure he gets eyes on someone in WWE to make sure that the eyes are on him to have a bidding war. I'm very much sure he would like to stay in AEW, but he wants to get paid. So that's kind of my take on this. But yeah, I think everything you said there too is right. And if this was a discussion that was out in the open, then that's a learning lesson for anybody. Don't ever do disciplinary action.
Yep.
Do it in a room with a witness or a camera or something. That's just my life lesson to anyone out there that has got a real job if you're in that role. But don't do that out on the floor. That is bad leadership. So not saying that's what happened, but there we go. So okay. Our last subject is kind of a two-parter, but Zach, there's too much wrestling this weekend. I think we're starting Thursday-ish, and then, I think that's one good thing. I think a big Cody contribution when AEW started is that they don't run stuff on WrestleMania weekend, because that's their weekend. And I think any company that doesn't run stuff on WrestleMania weekend at this point gets like points in my book. I mean, I guess ROH is Friday, but that was already in the books. I don't think they'd be running that if that wasn't already like booked and Tony Khan. Yeah, so I don't want to hear any of that in the comments. So looking at looking at those fingers right now. Still do it. I don't care. Get the engagement up. But so, too much wrestling, WrestleMania weekend question, and then to totally disregard what I just said there. What are you looking forward to if that's not WWE related this weekend?
I wouldn't. Here's the deal. I don't think it's too much wrestling this weekend. Because we're working, we're covering different things. I like this week. It's kind of like one huge week, in this business that we're in, and I think that's kind of fun. It's tiring, and it's hard to get like fully into everything. And I think you watch, or at least I watch shows differently this week because there is so much. But I kind of like the celebratory feel of it. So I'm more lenient on that. I am looking forward to, outside of WWE, and in some ways more than the WWE. I think the blood sport shows are just fantastic. Like that's my style. Yeah. I think it's unique. I think it helps. I think it's a fun show to watch on WrestleMania weekend because it's so different from everything else that you're gonna watch. Like it's not like, you know, a big hardcore thing or big spot fest like some other shows might be. It's not the big kind of fanfare of WrestleMania. Like it's really got its own niche and it feels very different. So that keeps things fresh. And so I always look forward to those shows, and particularly WrestleMania weekend because it is so different. So yeah, we'll be covering it at PWTorch.com too.
Cool. Yeah, and I have two if I can cheat. One's more for
fine. Already breaking our rules.
Yeah, I know. You know, I would say before the acquisition of AW or of Tony Khan buying Ring of Honor, I was very pessimistic on ROH coming back, and actually didn't think anything would happen. I think they would still have ran the show, but you know, for this, I covered ROH for a long time on the site, had a podcast that we talked about every week. Believe it or not, you can get like an hour and a half of content every week out of Ring of Honor. So it is possible, but
you guys were impressive with that for sure.
Yeah. I give all the credit to Ryan on that. So if you're watching this, Ryan, thank you. But yeah, I'm excited to see where that is going, because it's obviously the first Tony Khan show. It's interesting. It's got 6 matches. It seems very buttoned up and tight, which is so interesting to see Tony Khan do, and that might be his version of what Black and Gold NXT would be. You know, have a tight show and things like that. So I think, you know, I've seen a lot of those matches. Obviously not FTR and the Briscoes. That's obviously the must see match there. But just see how the show feels. Is it the same production quality? Is it, you know, who's back there? Is Delirious still booking? Have the book? I doubt it. Is Tony Khan back there? All that stuff I want to know and see who the announcers are. If Ian's with somebody else as opposed to what it was. So, and then the event I always look forward to every WrestleMania weekend is Joey Janela's Spring Break. That's kind of
I knew you were going to say that.
I knew you were going to say the independent WrestleMania, to me at least. So it's broken up into 2 nights. Don't love the format this year. I think they need to figure out what to do. I understand everyone's in town, so it's kind of hard not to have stuff around it. But part 1 is like, do you know off the top of your head? It's like Friday.
Part 1 is Thursday night at 8 Central or something like that.
Okay,
there's
not
a
too
late
bad.
night.
I mean, that's a good Thursday show, I think, especially if you're, you know, there.
It is, yeah.
Probably the night you're watching this one's out. But then part 2, which has kind of all the good matches. I mean, I guess Mox is on night 1, but night 2 has a lot of the fun matches, the Cardona stuff, the Cluster F match, which is just like a 70-person battle royal, which is always funny. Haha. That's at 2 a.m. on Eastern time on
that's insane
after WrestleMania. So I'll be covering that because I'm crazy and I picked it. So but so that's always a fun match. I think those in combo, I think if you know, again, you could probably combo those together and make a really good show out of that. But so I'm excited for that, see what ROH is like. And then Spring Break always has a couple moments, and you know, we'll see where those characters are going. I do think there's some people to watch out of there. Like I think Matt Cardona is somebody who's going to sign probably this year somewhere and feel like a bigger deal than when he left. And I mean, he's just doing amazing work. Obviously, an Impact right now, but I'm talking AEW, I'm talking WWE. I think he'd fit great in WWE with some sort of mild version of this character. So if you've been missing that, I'm sure you'll see a fully fleshed out version of what Matt Cardona is. And I assume he'd come back as Matt Cardona, not Zack Ryder. So just my tidbit there. So, all right, Zach, you got anything else you're looking forward to this weekend? I'm sure we're watching lots of stuff, but
lots of stuff. We'll have a lot to talk about next week, you know,
yes.
With the kind of running down. So nah, man, this, we'll put a bow on this thing, and great first show, dude.
Cool. Thanks. I appreciate everyone watching, giving us a shot here. We're going to have a lot more content here on this channel. As I said, we're going to have news hits every day, starting tomorrow is when this goes up. And so we'll do that. And then we're going to have this show every week and build out from there, obviously. So any ideas you might have out there watching, what do you want to see in content? You know, because, you know, Zach and I are only so intelligent and so gifted in this act. You know, we need, you know, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of wrestling content out there, and we want to be different. We want to be good. We want to be smart. We want to be analytical, all that stuff. So tell us what you want in the comments below, and we will certainly hear you out. And you can see our Twitter handles above and below. We'll see when I edit this, but appreciate everyone watching, and we will see you next time.